will be about compressing time and space. So how do we take point-in-time trends of unstructured opinion from anonymous groups, and then will the FTC allow us to do appropriate targeting within the social network and lookalikes on certain environments? So the 33 Across and Media 6 of the world that kind of came out very early on as, hey, we'll help target like-minded social people within the context of multiple different third-party sites.
So here's the question. 3 years from now, people that don't track us, do we think that a majority of major brands will be using social information to communicate differently in some form with their consumers?
And Dennis can jump in. I think it's all about noticing consent. So some people are more visible than others, but today we're arbitrary in how we do social media as a consumer and as a business.
I think it comes back down to transparency, as we were talking about in the last session. I think some consumers would be happy to have right time coupons delivered to them on their mobile device when they're in a neighborhood where there's a store that they have an interest in. But they would be totally creeped out if that text message or that Foursquare message or Facebook message or email arrived to them if they didn't consent to that. And we're all here because we're all permission marketers. And we have to remember that we have to get the permission in order to be effective. Otherwise, we're spammers. And so when we talk about geolocation, right time, there has to be an element of permission and transparency to it.
I think Rapleaf was a good example of that.
I was certainly going to bring that up.
They kind of got caught in the world of, sites change their policies very fast. And how do you adapt? And do you continue to play in that gray area?
I just wanted to comment on that too, about the whole Rapleaf situation and privacy. And it was interesting to hear some of the people on the street talk about this. And I'm so conflicted by this, because part of me, we talk about permission marketing all the time, but we also talk about sending relevant content. And so I think what Rapleaf was trying to do, and Floton, all these other social graph, providing social information and appending that social information, I think the idea behind it, obviously, is to provide more relevant content. And it's interesting to me because I talk to people like my mom or my wife, and I ask the same questions that Jeff asked the people on the street. And it's funny how it's kind of evolved over time. I mean, if you ask people, oh yeah, that's creepy that they would know this about me. But at the same time, they're going to open that email, they're going to click on that link, and they're going to buy something because it is relevant. So
Well, it came back to consumer transparency, though. The consumers don't know what you tracked.
Well, I don't know. That's because I mean, this is okay. I'm going to make a statement that has absolutely no data behind it, which I tend to do a lot. I don't think people care. I don't think people honestly care. I mean, this whole thing about people are going to boycott Facebook months ago, when Facebook, the new privacy. How many people boycotted Facebook? None. I mean, a minuscule amount, right? So I just think we talk about it a lot in this industry because we think about permission and privacy so much. But does the consumer really care? Again, this is no data, nothing.
On
just
Facebook,
me talking.
I would say there's no other game in town, so it's very difficult to.
Well, there's diaspora, but no one flocked to diaspora. I mean, they sort of touted themselves as the alternative to Facebook. But here's something that I always ask my friends when we start talking about Facebook and privacy. I say, look, if you're not paying for the product, you are the product. So Facebook has 500 million users all using this tool for free. How is Facebook going to pay the bills? They got to advertise. We all know that. We just don't want to admit it. And it's really interesting, what could happen. Let's look at Ning, N-I-N-G. They were a free platform. You can go create your own social network. And it was free as the creator of the Ning site because they would run ads. If you didn't want those ads there, then you can pay for it. But that model wasn't working. So what did Ning do? They just turned off the free, and you had to pay for it. And they lost like 90% of their social networks, but that 10% that's there that's paying for it, they're using it effectively. And it's really interesting. What happens if privacy really becomes an issue with Facebook? Then here's a thought. What if Facebook starts offering you for $10 a month, you can turn off all ads? What would happen to us as marketers if that were to happen when people are congregating around Facebook?
Is it really the ads that people are upset about? I don't think so. I mean,
Well, I think we're mixing several issues. I mean, one is consumer perception of privacy. The other is whether we as a business and an industry are clear around how notice and consent. And, I would say it's an evolution in our industry. This isn't a privacy discussion. My privacy officer would kill me if we even got deeper. But I think the reality is there's a value exchange. And you actually hit it on the head, and I hadn't heard it articulated, but consumers are the product. I mean, the reality is you are going to give a certain level of information and value in exchange for relevant experiences.
and I think that people understand that by and large. I mean, people buy newspapers, and they go online to, NewYorkTimes.com and they read, and that's free, and they realize there are ads there. So I think people understand this exchange of time and attention. I don't think that was the issue with Facebook at all, and I say that in a fairly biased way because I am an avid anti-Facebook protester. I shut down my Facebook account months and months ago after the privacy policy had been changed without notification for like the second time in a year, and I have kids, and the information I exchange, I don't want to be out there.
So where can we find Chad White today? We want to connect.
Well,
You could always Google Chad White, but just be aware what you may see is not what you would
Top hit on
expect.
Chad White is a very attractive male model.
So I think where this all shifts, I created a role recently in my organization around devices and social because I saw them so intertangled that they weren't separate entities. And we're going to ask you in a moment about what we could do and what's going to happen in the next 14 months. And I think there will be more applied science and rigor and negotiation with the social networking sites and experiences that customer recognition will be much more fine-tuned at the segment level, not the individual level. I also think that loyalty is going to shift how we look at social. Loyalty in the token economy is all about consumption of rewards, and you can appreciate it. Brands are now looking at these valuable experiences on offline social environments at the app level, and how is that going to impact my view of currency and how I reward clients. And so I think it's going to blend with our traditional view of how we manage loyalty.
I agree with that. I mean, before social media was around, we all knew word of mouth marketing was one of the most effective ways to get people back into your store on your website. But before social media was around, we would just provide a great experience and hope that that customer would come back, would just hope that that customer would tell their friends about that experience. Today with social media, we can not only facilitate word of mouth marketing, we can actually measure it. And so I think attribution is going to play a big role going forward, being able to identify who your influencers are. We're just sort of scraping the level of that right now. There's, the concept of clout. I don't know if any of y'all, if you don't know what clout is, check it out. It's K-L-O-U-T. It's sort of like your social credit score. How much of an influencer are you? And right now, we can do some data integration and find out who of our subscribers have a lot of clout online, and we can treat them differently. But I sort of warn people from that because in today's environment, everybody can be an influencer. I think what matters more is, are they an influencer or an advocate of your brand? And if so, you better be rewarding them, you better be incentivizing them to continue to do that because they are your number one asset.
Yeah, I know we're running short on time, but I think we'd be remiss without talking about what I think is one of the biggest influencers of where things are going with email and social, and that's the convergence of email platforms and social platforms. Gmail, Yahoo, Hotmail have all been adding social components to their inboxes. Facebook, just announced, a pseudo email product. So I'd love to talk about what sort of impact
Are you referring
that's
to
gonna have.
the consumer experience, right?
Well, for instance, right now rendering on Facebook messages, for email messages, the default is the plain text version of a multi-part email. That's what comes up. And then there's a link, I think, that says expand, that you can click on, that no one will click on, to see the HTML part of that email. So things like that really kind of flip us back to the late 1990s in terms of email design. That's going to have an impact on how we go to market.
I look at that as kind of three-pronged. One is the database problem, right? If you start introducing a new ISP or a new domain that competes with my legacy domains over time, it becomes a database problem. And how do I measure response when capacity is going up? And how do I re-optimize down? So it becomes a financial issue. Is it a distraction? The other is the consumer experience. Will they adopt it? And how much do I have to use of my budget to apply testing around it to understand, is it really a viable vehicle? Or is it a notification vehicle? But every one of the inboxes are converging. Microsoft is coming out with new products for a social inbox. We talked about it at the last summit. Every one of them will have to answer to Facebook. I think Facebook, third prong, the industry, will force the ISPs to react. They'll absolutely force them to react. And I think the products will evolve, the experiences will evolve, and honestly, I think it's a good thing. We've been talking about how do we get ISPs to work together for common standards, and this might force that competitive view.
DJ, what's on?
Yeah, so is your question more around like what Facebook is doing, or more you're talking about social inbox too for, like priority email, or priority inbox for Gmail, and those sort of things?
Well, it's the inbox providers like Gmail and Hotmail and Yahoo Mail, they're looking more and more like Facebook and MySpace and
They're all
vice
trying
versa.
to aggregate the experience.
They're all coming together.
Yeah, I think it is interesting that, as you mentioned, the default for Facebook is this plain text, and
yeah.
I don't know. I go back to this. I kind of wonder if, because we're all so engrossed in the industry, how much some of that stuff matters. If consumers, I wrote a couple of years ago, I think, about Zappos and how terrible their email program was, and how they sent out plain text messages with links, and it was just you could print out the email and it was 17 pages long, and I assume, I want to assume that it worked for them, or else they wouldn't keep doing it. Now, I think since then they've changed it a little bit. Now there's an email that looks like it was built in the 21st century. But I think it's going to be interesting to see if people are engaging with those emails that are not as what we would call in the industry, appealing and best practices. So.
Yeah, I think the challenge there is going to be, I see your hand, Ryan. I think the challenge there is going to be more for lifestyle brands. I think it's very easy with text to communicate some of these value brand messages, but how can you communicate in text? Apparel sold by Neiman Marcus, or motorcycles sold by Harley Davidson. They're selling a way of life, and it's very hard to do that with boring little characters. So I think the challenge is going to be there. But one thing I think is going to be interesting, a part of this is, I'm really curious to see if we're going to find, in the same way that we find forward to a friend functionality in every email client, whether or not we're going to have SWIN functionality built in to the email clients 2 years from now. And how will that change things when you're not able to measure those clicks within your program? So I think it's changes like that that'll be really interesting. Ryan, any have a question or a comment?
I was going to make a comment. I don't know the mic, but so Zappos is actually an interesting case. We were on a panel. With Zappos at DMA, and at Zappos they actually aren't as concerned about things like HTML and all of the quote-unquote best practices, because they've created a customer experience that their customers love, right? They have the most passionate base of customers. Anybody here shop at Zappos? Yeah, anybody here like Zappos, that shops at Zappos? So I think, especially when we talk about social email, yes, the social web affects Zappos brand significantly, because it's less important how they follow all the things that we need to do to get small incremental increases in email programs, because they have an army of advocates that talk about their products on a regular basis. So I just think it's an interesting.
Well, it kind of goes to the example of Apple then,
It's the
too,
same
right? I mean,
example.
people, I don't know who said, somebody said it, people, the consumers like Apple, not necessarily because they like how the email looks, or they like that it's a simple, clear call to action, or any of that stuff. They like it because they like Apple, and they just get their emails and like them.
Yeah, and just to touch upon Zappos, I mean, their number one engagement tool wasn't Twitter, it wasn't Facebook, it was the telephone. And they were one of the first companies to put their telephone number in big bright letters on the site because they wanted you to call, because it was an opportunity to engage, or to wow, as Tony likes to call it. You can call Zappos today and order a pizza, and they'll deliver it to you. They don't sell pizza, but they'll find a pizza and deliver it to you. And that ultimately, we can't market our way out of sucking, for lack of a better word. If you don't provide a good product service, if you don't offer
Somebody
a good,
tweet that.
I mean, tweet that. Go, there's no marketing cure for sucking at what you do. You got to have a good customer experience. And I'll tell you what, if you provide a good customer experience, social media will reward you in ways you couldn't even fathom. If you suck at what you do, social media will let you know. But that's not a bad thing, because you can use that feedback constructively to make your company better at what you do.
Well, hey.
Boom.
Yeah.
Yep, that's it for us. Thank you so much. Thanks to the
Hey. Not sure which one this is. There we go. So yeah, I want to thank you guys. Great job. Appreciate your